if we can focus on lowering chronically elevated insulin levels, that will be the primary driver behind fat loss. It's no wonder the stats are so bad. So you got to eat clean food every single day. You got to exercise for an hour every single day. You have to have a positive, supportive environment. You have to have low levels of depression and issues.
Everything was about counting calories. How come I've been doing all the right things and not seeing the type of progress that I should? I'm not feeling any better. I'm feeling like crap, even though I am losing weight.
We'll talk about calorie counting as a whole. This is very fascinating. If an individual is in a caloric surplus, they will gain weight. If you're forcing yourself in a calorie deficit, you're forcing the weight loss and you're not addressing insulin to the maximum ability, your body's working against you. What I'm saying, my hypothesis is...
We had quite the response from our podcast on peptides and weight loss and the best practices for how to see real results.
Yeah.
And the questions that we've been getting, how come I've been doing all the right things and not seeing the type of progress that I should? I'm not feeling any better. I'm feeling like crap, even though I am losing weight. So many variables. And I think about when we were up and coming, everything was about counting calories. It was conservation of mass. Either you're burning more than you're taking in, or you're taking in more than you're burning. And it seems now there are so many more layers and so many more complications, and just getting deep into the other variables past just counting calories. What do we know now are the new rules of the game for trying to achieve success past just counting those numbers?
Yeah, and I'm glad we're bringing this up, because when we talked about peptides, remember we separated them into categories: our appetite suppressant peptides and our fat mobilizing peptides. And the appetite suppressants were the ones that almost guaranteed you're going to get into a calorie deficit. They focused on getting you into a calorie deficit. And I will still state again that that's more important. Before mobilizing body fat, you need to ensure you're in a calorie deficit, because you won't lose weight at all. But then that sort of conflicts what we're talking about here right now, which is, well, what about hormones? What about insulin? This whole carbohydrate insulin theory of obesity is very powerful and answers all of the unanswered questions. The biggest one being, why the hell is obesity going out of control? And despite our efforts to focus on calories, which is clearly not working.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what makes this so difficult to have a position on, to take a position on, is that when you look at the literature, as they've done this, right? They've looked at studies trying to figure out, okay, so if we control calories, if we look at both arms of the multiple arms of the study, and we use our highest ability to control that everybody's getting the same calories, we're all in the same deficit, but we manipulated insulin, right? Meaning via fasting, lower carbohydrates, or allowing somebody to have the normal 60%, which is RDA recommendations, which is bullshit. But to purely figure out, is fasting or keto going to yield better fat loss? And to many surprise, including myself when I first saw this, fat loss was the same. These are the highest randomized control trials showing, and even meta-analysis, where they take the randomized control trials and sort of do a summary of those, right? Which gives us even more evidence. It would appear that it doesn't matter. And when you interpret those the way they're being interpreted now by many figures in the space that I have a lot of respect for, it does produce this very difficult to argue against position that you don't have to go keto, you don't have to fast, things that you would normally do to control insulin, if we're talking about effective ways for fat loss. Now, the discussion of other benefits for fasting, the other benefits for keto, that's not what this argument and debate is about. This argument and debate is, well, all I have to worry about is calories? Are all diets bullshit, right? Or why is it that when we focus on insulin, why is it that when people go into ketogenic diets, when they go into fasting, they have such an easier time losing fat, right? But then why can't the data back that up, right? So it's very, very confusing, to say the least. And I have a theory. I have a hypothesis here. And I would love an opportunity to speak with some experts in this space on both sides. And that is my goal, is to get them on the podcast, because we need more answers. And I think that, like, the basis of my hypothesis, and to be clear, I am on the side that the end all be all is insulin. I am on the side that the end all be all is that if we can focus on lowering chronically elevated insulin levels, that will be the primary driver behind fat loss. But what I'm not also saying at the same time of saying that is that calories don't matter. And so I'm sort of the dark horse in the middle, because I haven't seen anybody sort of have the exact or really close idea to what I believe and what I've expressed. It's usually very extreme on one side. It's all about calories or it's all about insulin. And the insulin, you see a lot of people on TikTok selling the Unimate and the fiber, which I love those products, but let's be real, they're not going to work for really progressed metabolic deranged individuals. And they'll say things like calories don't matter, right? But they do. So the law of thermodynamics does have some truth to it, to the extent that if an individual is in a caloric surplus, they will gain weight. If an individual is in a caloric deficit, they will lose weight. We know that. And the data actually shows that. Those beautiful RCTs that we talked about earlier already proves that. So we don't need more research on that. In fact, I want to bring this up too, because it goes back to the point that I'm trying to make. In those randomized control studies where they showed the same amount of fat loss when you were trying to determine whether insulin mattered, they used high-level metabolic wards where individuals were put into these wards, which is like a situation where essentially you're monitored 24/7. So we know that you are actually in the calorie deficit that we need to know that you're in order to have accurate conclusions from the research. Very expensive. Most caloric-based studies are basically report based. And we know how inaccurate those are, because my gosh, people getting them to count their calories, let alone having accuracy behind it, is not going to happen often. Very, very tightly controlled studies. And that brings me to my hypothesis. My current theory is that we are incorrectly applying those randomized control trials. We are incorrectly applying them. The data is beautiful. Nothing's wrong with the data. But remember, the point of studies is so that we can apply them to the real world, right? And there's really, really good high randomized control studies. And then there's case studies, which we know anecdotal evidence, which means, hey, it's not proven. It just means it may be true, right? But none of it matters, either one of those categories, if we take them and we incorrectly apply them to the universe, right? Let's say I wanted to create a study, a very basic study where I wanted to look at the impact of eating apples and their effect on building muscle mass. So we do this design, we eat the apples, we run the experiment, and then we learn, wow, if I have 2 apples or more per day, I build more muscle mass. That was our conclusion from the study. And then I go out in the real world and start eating oranges and go, well, they're fruit, right? And so therefore I'm going to have the same effect. There's no scientist in the world that's going to say, well, you can extrapolate that. Oranges are not apples, right? Like we all get that. So what I'm saying, my hypothesis is that we are incorrectly applying these studies that everybody, and again, some very well-educated individuals are also interpreting these studies, the ones that we talked about earlier regarding the control for calories, and hey, it doesn't matter if you're fasting or doing keto or not, all that matters is calories. They're taking these studies and assuming that's going to apply to the real world. Well, let's take a step back for a second. Metabolic wards, individuals accounted for. You had to eat in the calorie deficit that they were studying. So the very fact that these are so tightly controlled to give us accuracy behind those caloric intakes are the very reason why it doesn't apply to the real world. Because when can we ever say, if 100 people said, yes, I'm going to put myself in a calorie deficit, trust me, I got it. You would never trust 100 individuals who successfully put themselves into a caloric deficit and expect to get reliable data on that. Because we know what happens when you restrict calories is your hunger goes through the roof. It becomes very challenging. We struggle with cravings. We struggle with all the body trying to fight the caloric deficit. In order to apply those studies to the real world, you would have to have some sort of version of metabolic ward. You'd have to have an individual walking around you, following you, ensuring you adhere to a calorie deficit. It doesn't actually pan out in the real world. The irony in the situation, when people talk about how high level the data is the very reason why we're incorrectly applying it.
Okay. Can I ask you a series of yes or no questions?
Yes.
Is it safe to say that most individuals absorb calories at a different rate. Let's say
Absorb.
malabsorption.
Yep.
Okay. Is it fair to say that hormonal changes can affect your appetite levels and your energy levels and therefore your cardiac output and your output in general?
Yes.
Okay. Just those two factors in mind, it's possible to have the same plate as the person next to you and have it affect you differently throughout the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So those two people could be on the exact same diet plan on, let's say, MyFitnessPal from a calorie perspective and actually get two different results.
Absolutely. To expand on that, you could take two identical twins, the closest to being identical that we have, and inject one with more thyroid hormone or more testosterone hormone or more insulin,
Mm-hmm.
and their body's going to process that food and assimilate it very differently.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that you brought that up. And I just wanted to add to that. Calories are the end all be all, right? Because we have to be in that surplus or deficit. But it's the function of hormones, specifically the main one being insulin, that's going to influence, like we said earlier, whether the individual gets into that caloric deficit and adheres to it. So there's two primary functions that insulin, and we're talking about chronically
Mm-hmm.
elevated insulin levels, because if your insulin levels in a healthy situation are not chronically elevated, and they're only elevated when you eat, and so this is not the case. But for individuals who have that chronic elevation of insulin levels, their body is not functioning in a normal situation. One of the functions, primary function of insulin is storage, storage, storage. It is the most anabolic hormone. And it's important to understand that because it relates to what I'm about to explain that insulin does to influence whether the individual is going to get into that deficit. So people think of insulin as the blood sugar hormone. And I get it because diabetes is insanely, prevalent. But it's also equally as important for insulin to do what else it does, which is store the amino acids into your cells. It stores the fat tissue into your cells. So insulin is the most anabolic hormone to the point where bodybuilders are even willing to risk their lives by injecting insulin, because a diabetic injecting insulin, while that can still be lethal, is much less dangerous because they're not sensitive to the insulin versus a bodybuilder. So, and they'll still do it. Testosterone, growth hormone, nothing compares to how strong the effect of insulin is to grow. So we're talking about the most potent growth signal. And you're going to tell me that doesn't affect the ability? It's all about calories. We have to understand what I'm saying here is if the two identical twins were in the same caloric deficit, but one had chronically elevated insulin levels, that would be a much different scenario than his twin that would have the same caloric deficit, but have much lower insulin levels. On the short-term weight loss, those studies showed us that there was no net change, but it's the long-term aspect, which is ultimately what we're really trying to get at, long-term lasting weight loss, which I'm arguing, and it's not just me, I didn't come up with the carbohydrate insulin model. I think Dr. Fung in the obesity code and the diabetes code really paved the way for the carbohydrate insulin model. But what I'm saying is the two variables that insulin will do that will really impact this is, number one, we kind of briefly talked about hunger. We all know this. When you start restricting your calories and you're not on GLP-1 medications, that's the biggie. You're not on appetite suppressants, you start getting hungry. It's the end all be all, like, difficulty with reducing calories and why you have to have super mental toughness to override your hunger. Some of us can, a lot of us can't. But the other thing that's probably even more deleterious to your ability to get into that caloric deficit and maintain it is the impact of insulin on your metabolism. So the total amount of calories an individual burns at rest is called TEE, total energy expenditure. Well, 60 to 70% of that number is and comes from the BMR, or basal metabolic rate. So exercise is only a small portion of this. The majority is BMR. Chronically elevated insulin levels do indeed and can impact that number, causing it to downregulate, which would be the net result of what we know chronically elevated insulin levels are trying to do, which is store, store, store. You don't have this selective function of a hormone that's going to change. Like, I'm gonna do this under this condition, but I'm gonna do this under this condition. Insulin's always doing what it does. I've never heard or understand a dynamic hormone, but so insulin's trying to store, and so this is how it gets away with storing, is it alters the metabolism. So the effect on hunger and the effect on slowing down the metabolism is the reason why, at the long-term aspect, my theory is that the chronically elevated insulin levels will impact that individual. And ultimately, this is why they're going to fluctuate. This is why they're going to have difficulty losing, or they're going to lose and they're going to gain back. It's not that smooth, easy process. If you have chronically lower levels, then yeah, all you got to do is worry about a deficit. Mm-hmm. So I truthfully believe all these individuals out there that are proponents from the calorie only model, not only do they rely on this study, because again, I think we're inaccurately representing this and applying it, but when they think of themselves and they go, well, I lost 200 pounds, because you weren't that insulin resistant. Or you were, but your insulin resistance was able to completely heal with just the change in calories, because we know caloric restriction does help insulin resistance. But we know, and this is not a controversial statement, fasting and keto will help your insulin much more. And so for certain individuals, their insulin resistance is past this threshold and it needs something more aggressive to focus on that. That's my current hypothesis, and I really, really, really look forward to being able to have a discussion with the experts in this space, because I don't think anybody has this current hypothesis out there yet. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, and you mentioned appetite and hunger, and we brought this up months ago, but I got to go back to it because we talked about that study with the shakes, right? There was the group with the indulgent shake, and there was the group with the skinny shake. They were exactly the same thing. And the group that had the indulgent shake that they thought was higher calories, they were fuller longer, purely from a psychosomatic response. And we know the mind can control the body. And to this extent, it's kind of miraculous. I mean, it's crazy. So I think we've kind of blown past it's just the numbers, it's just the calories. So then how the hell do you have any type of barometer for this is my benchmark for success? Like what's my litmus test every day of saying, okay, well, am I seeing results? It's not just a number. What do I do now? Right? How do we get through this murky water here?
Yeah, I think, when it comes to progress, most people are overweight enough to where we're comfortable just using the scale, sticking with the scale from the beginning parts of it, because we do have so much excessive levels of body fat. Mm-hmm. For the individuals watching this that are maybe post their GLP-1 experience, and now they're at a healthy body weight and a healthy BMI, but they know damn well they're not healthy. They don't look good or feel good at all, period. And then they don't look good and feel good about when their shirt's off either. This is the skinny fat phenomena, which is happening to people when they utilize these medications, the GLP-1 specifically, and they don't have the guidance to support the community to understand, or maybe they weren't stacking it with those amazing fat loss peptides, and they lost a tremendous amount of muscle. It does become trickier at that point. You do need to rely on body fat percentage. And with body fat percentage, there's no reliable methods, and so that are cheap and easy to use. Right. So honestly, if you're in that situation where you're closer to your target weight, then we got to rely on pictures. Mm-hmm. I think pictures and clothes size. We have our clients and patients do a front, lateral, and back shot every 2 weeks in the same setting, in the same lighting, and that way they can be objective and look at it and assess that they're moving in the right direction, so they're not so fixated on the scale. But if you got more than 30 pounds to lose, 40 pounds to lose, that ain't muscle. Like, you could grab yourself and you know whether you got extra fat. Using the scale as that initial barometer, I think is great for most people in most situations.
Now, to layer that, there's two big challenges that I see with anyone looking to still lose weight. One is chronic caloric deficit, especially if it's extreme weight loss, is going to lead to a downregulation of your metabolic rate.
Yeah, we talked about that significantly in the last episode.
So then problem number two, of course, is hand in hand with that. It's the catabolization or the loss of muscle mass. And knowing that we need to be as muscle sparing as possible. We want to protect that tissue, not only for orthopedic and metabolism and health reasons, but because it keeps the fat off, right? Yep. And we know that if we lose the fat and lose the weight, yep, right, even with a semi-healthy lifestyle, if your metabolism is lower than it used to be, even if your habits are slightly better, that weight's going to creep back up. So how do we keep that metabolism elevated while still losing weight? Like, how do we really maximize that?
Yeah. So this ultimately goes back down to muscle mass. Like you were saying, muscle is very metabolically active. The more muscle mass we have on our body, the more calories we burn at rest. So protecting that muscle mass is the most important thing. And there's so many peptides, and I'm glad you asked. So The first category of peptides I think about are the growth hormone secretagogues and AOD 9604, which is technically not a growth hormone secretagogue. So as a reminder, when we talk about peptides, we talked about the two categories. We're in this fat mobilizing category. So growth hormone is a hormone that your body produces, men and women. You get a big pulse in the evening. Women tend to get more of like a bleed and men get pulses. But the function of growth hormone in the body is fat mobilization, the building of muscle mass, and actually growth hormone is very unique in the fact that you have an actual increase of muscle fibers. So hyperplasia, as opposed to the effects of testosterone androgens, which is just hypertrophy, growth of muscle fibers. That's why there's such good synergy to getting all your hormones optimized. Growth hormone also improves cognitive function, and it may help your immune system. It helps with musculoskeletal healing. It's involved in all those initial cartilage regeneration and growth processes. So growth hormone is amazing. And then AOD is just the isolated fat loss function of all those amazing things. People usually say, well, why would you want AOD if growth hormone does all those other things? If you have a lot of fat on your body, I want that concentrated effect of AOD. And while there hasn't been a head-to-head comparison of the fat loss effects between AOD and growth hormone secretagogues, just from anecdotal observation, working with so many patients, AOD is more effective for fat loss. But then as we start getting closer to that ideal weight that we talked about earlier, and a lot of people are far from the ideal body composition, then we can start transitioning AOD over to one of these growth hormone secretagogues like Samorelin, like Tesamorelin, like CJC 1295, ipamorelin, and that will allow us to get the benefit of both continuing to mobilize body fat, but protecting the muscle mass, which is so vitally important. And depending on kind of where we're at in the program, we do hit points with our patients where they're close enough to the goal where we actually say, hey, weight loss we're pausing this. We'll go into weight maintenance mode for a couple of weeks. And we might even go into weight gain. And usually we have enough trust with our patients. Like, gain, I'm like, I want you to gain 2 pounds a month. I want you to gain 3 pounds a month. We're severely under muscular right now. Let's actually focus on increasing our calories, keeping the macronutrients, what we're eating in that healthy category, just keeping the processed consumption, 80%, 85%, keeping the protein intake high, but we're just manipulating the calories. You do that when you have your growth hormone levels high from these growth hormone secretagogues, and you have testosterone optimized, whether it's naturally or you need to get on actual TRT. Now we build muscle mass, and that makes massive improvements into our metabolism. Everybody at the end of a weight loss goal is going to have to most likely put on some muscle mass, unless I think you're genetically gifted or you did the most perfectly executed weight loss program where you took your time, you optimized your growth hormone, you optimized your testosterone, you followed our protocol to a T, you microdosed the GLP-1, you did, a lot of factors. We always shoot for that. We always shoot to protect as much muscle mass as we possibly can. But we have these amazing peptides to help us along the way.
Do you personally believe that it's possible to see the results you want to without getting your phone out, getting your pocketbook out, and actually recording your calories? Is there a general way to eyeball things, or is there a strategy where you can have a daily set plan of attack without literally having to count each calorie? Or is there really no way around it for someone who needs to get results?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you asked that question. We'll talk about calorie counting as a whole. This is very fascinating. I'll even take a step back and let's talk some research. We've talked before, lasting weight loss as a whole is extremely challenging. Over 80% of people who've ever lost more than 10% of their body weight fail to keep it off long term after a couple of years. That's very daunting, and most people would never guess that high. Even your skeptics will be like, I don't know, 60, 70%. I know it's bad, and you tell them it's actually 85. They're like, what? Like this? You basically have to be a unicorn to have successfully maintained weight loss, right? Very rare. They've done further studies, and they actually looked at, well, what are the characteristics that are present in those unicorns? It's really fascinating. And I'll list off some of the things, but continual monitoring of caloric intake, exercise up to like an hour every single day, constant consciousness over the quality of what you're eating, both on weekdays and weekends. So you got to eat clean food every single day. You got to exercise for an hour every single day. You have to have a positive, supportive environment. You have to have low levels of depression and issues. So, oh, great, no problem, right? That's all I got to do. Like, that's it. I'm not asking for a lot, right? And so it's no wonder the stats are so bad
Mm-hmm.
because you got to be a literal David Goggins, to meet the requirements of lasting weight loss. So it's what I take away from that is it actually strengthens everything that we've been saying right now. You can override hormones with calories if you have a David Goggins like mental toughness.
Mm-hmm.
And that throws another wrench into the confusingness of what we're talking about and the argument and the controversy. We have to look at, well, what's going to work for the largest amount of people? And it's not requiring David Goggins like mental toughness. We want to make it easy for people. We want to make it sustainable.
Mm.
And when you get the body to work with you, because if you think about it in that method, if you're forcing yourself in a calorie deficit, you're forcing the weight loss and you're not addressing insulin to the maximum ability, your body's working against you. Let's work with our body, not against it. Let's get our insulin levels as opposite from chronically elevated as we possibly can. Get them as low as we possibly can. And that would be healing insulin resistance, reducing inflammation, and becoming fat adapted as much, or metabolically flexible as much as we possibly can. So I bring all that up because let's go back to what you asked, which is calories. Yes, if you were okay with counting calories for the rest of your life, and I do think there's a 0.01% of the population that probably is very neurotic and loves doing it. If you love doing it, you should do it for the rest of your life because we talked about how calories do matter. It gives you a good statistical advantage. You won't be perfect because you can't control when your BMR lowers and you don't know. You'll be perfectly counting your calories and you won't be losing weight. And you're like, how does that make sense? Because you didn't realize your hormones influence your BMR, yada, yada, yada. We've all been there and seen that. But it does give you some advantage. Now, what I think, and I think you were alluding to this, and this is actually what we do in our programs, is we say, look, have you ever counted calories before? And it's probably 60 to 80% of people that start our program said, yeah, I've done it before. Like, I know how to do it. Please, God, don't tell me you're going to make me do it. I go, no, I'm just asking, and then every now and then someone's like, I've never counted before. Do I have to do that too? It's like, well, give me a month. Give me a month if you've never counted before, because you learn so much from the experiment. I call it a calorie counting experiment where you spend 1 month doing it. You're very conscious about it. You learn some crazy, like what a tablespoon of peanut butter actually looks like, right? It's only 150 calories if you actually eat a tablespoon. Yeah. Most people don't realize they're doing 2 to 3. You probably wouldn't guess before you have experience with calories that a piece of pizza can be up to 400 to 500 depending on the size. Like, holy shit, So a couple slices, you're already to 1,500 possibly into it. So you learn some just kind of like, it's like a reality check, I guess. There's some takeaways that after, right? Some heavy lasagna can be really dense in a tiny little section. So you appreciate how calorically dense some foods can be. Mm-hmm. And then you learn, holy crap, there's barely 60, 70 calories in a grapefruit. That massive thing, I can eat all that and I'm not going to yeah. Then you learn things like calories have 0 or possibly negative. Which is, whether that's true or not, right. It's close enough to 0. It's good for me. But so you walk away from the calorie counting experiment with some calorie consciousness. What we're trying to create is sustainability, having some consciousness in the back of your mind where you can kind of just, you don't even need to necessarily have a conscious number, but you want to have like an idea of like, okay, I ate a lot of food in the morning or earlier for lunch. I'm going to back off. Pizza's in front of me. Probably shouldn't have a piece of pizza right now because I'm probably closer to my daily goal. That's all you got to do. Just little tidbits and strategies, and we call that calorie consciousness. You have to earn that ability to do that, which comes from counting calories. So I only make our patients do it for about a month, unless they've already done it, then great. And if they're in a reset, like we talked about last time, if we're in a plateau when you come to me, then we're going to fix that. And in order to fix that, we do have to count calories and be aware during that reset to fix the plateau.
Okay, let's finish with this, because most people, we know, they're insulin resistant. That's just the truth of the matter. So let's say I'm a normal person, I'm a grazer, I'm eating 6 meals a day to rev up my metabolism. Definitely won't lead to more insulin resistance or diabetes. What does my next 2 months look like? Right? Like what's an actual plan of attack that I can follow and realistically achieve?
For an individual who's currently doing the whole 6
average
meals a day,
normal grazer.
What I do in my coaching programs is it's that first conversation, right? So we get in a Zoom, we're figuring out like where's your mindset, where are you at? We set the goals, we do all that. Once I get into a conversation with you and figure out like how would you like to approach it, it's like there's a little bit of like, I get to choose. It's like, well, yeah, of course, we're customizing this around you. We have some tenets and things that we have to follow.
Mm-hmm.
If you told me, can I do this and eat a cup of sugar every day? I'm going to say no, right? But we can work within sort of the mindset of the individual. So the grazer, which would be contradictory to how I want to approach it, right? For me, everybody knows that that's not the first time watching this. And if it is fasting, 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 or intermittent fasting every single day, and then we're doing one long fast every single week. So that's not going to work for somebody who wants to graze all day, all 7 days a week. So I'll have a conversation with them and I'll ask them, they're like, is there a particular reason why you're doing that? This is just kind of what feels better to me. It's like, okay, have you tried fasting? Probably not. Well, let's give it a shot and see what happens and kind of work with the patient and set up small goals. As long as I can get an agreement from the patient to try something, then we're good. Then it's not stressful. I never force a certain thing on a patient again, unless they're trying to eat a cup of sugar. then I'm going to say, why are you paying me? Because I can't let you do that. It ain't going to work. But if it's something that I don't think is going to create too much of an issue, then we can have that conversation, because I also don't want them to be stressed about it. So perfect world, where I've seen the best results is that fasting lifestyle where we're shrinking our eating window every day, and then we get a long fast every day. So having that conversation, establishing a battle plan that the individual is in agreement with, getting that mindset straight, I think that's the best starting point. You can graze all you want in that 8-hour window. Go for it. I don't care whether you have two's minimum, 2, 3, 4, 5 meals, perfect. But we just got to give our bodies a break where we're not eating, so that our insulin levels can drop, so that we can start to heal from that insulin resistance pathway.
And do you find most people terribly challenged going from a all day lifestyle to compressing that in 8 hours?
No, not at all, because it's so liberating, and it's so time producing.
Mm-hmm.
The only time like we get concern is diabetics, obviously, and hypoglycemics, because you can have hypoglycemia independent of diabetes. And that's an understanding. That's just like more of like, I want to do this, but like, what if my blood sugar drops? And and it's interesting. As always, we can't give you medical advice, especially if you're diabetic. You got to talk to your practitioners. But fasting is the way out of diabetes. And if you don't want to take my word for it, go read the diabetes code from Dr. Jason Fung. For any individual, let's kind of get away from a bunch of medications for a second and just focus on that hypoglycemic, or maybe the diabetic patient who's maybe on just metformin or pre-diabetes. If you are struggling to fast like beyond 16 hours, you start getting lightheaded, you start getting dizzy. It's like, okay, well, that's going to be the area we're going to focus on. We're going to go low carb as we possibly can, because going on a ketogenic diet also improves our metabolic flexibility, which gives us more resilience to being able to go into the intermittent fasting, into the longer fasting, because that's why we're getting dizzy, lightheaded, is because our blood sugar is dropping, because our body hasn't developed enough flexibility to be able to maintain optimal levels of blood glucose when you're not eating, right? Because we're constantly eating carbs and we're eating them all the time. So that metabolic flexibility is what we're trying to build. So we can take things like exogenous ketones about an hour before you hit that area where you're going to feel sluggish. That'll instantaneously give you some juice, some ability to go through it. And it's the exact energy that we're trying to get to, because ketone bodies are the fuel that your body is running off of when it's burning fat. Metabolic flexibility means you can produce ketone bodies much quicker. And so giving you external is a good sort of stepping stone to get your body more comfortable with being flexible. And then eating fiber. I actually just picked this one up recently from one of my mentors, Dr. Dan Kellums. Yeah, he's had a lot of success with having patients who are in that area who struggle with fasting, telling them to eat fiber with every single meal. Just an additional load of fiber puts them into a state where they're converting the fiber into the short chain fatty acids, and that itself will produce more metabolic flexibility. So that was an interesting one that we've started adding to as well. But other than that, man, that's about it.
Perfect, man. Last question. Out of all the things you've learned about health and sciences over the course of your lifetime, give me and give the audience one piece of information that you've learned that you wish you would have learned or applied years prior.
The fasting. I mean, unequivocally, I lost all my weight with the old school method of counting calories and macros, 6 meals a day. I did cardio in the morning. I did weight training in the afternoon. I mean, I busted my ass.
2 days.
And yeah, 2 days. And I could never maintain my weight loss. And so I didn't understand fasting or what fasting did. Even when I learned fasting, I still didn't know what it was doing yet, but I was willing to try it. If I would have known about that sooner, it would have made my life much easier. Luckily for me at that time, I was so young and unpopular and unsocial that I didn't really have much of a life. So I was able to dive full, head face and first into the lifestyle. But yeah, I struggled in college because then I got busy, then I got social, and I just didn't want a life that centered around that. I didn't have time, and so finally, when I learned about fasting and then longer fasting, and all of a sudden it was just easier to maintain a healthy weight. Yeah, yeah, it's definitely wish I would have known that then.
Stop right there. Thanks, man.
All right, we'll see you later.